Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. My fellow Toastmasters, I am here to talk to you about an issue that is affecting America more and more every day. Giving bribes, taking bribes, lying, selling yourself. This, my fellow Toastmasters, is corruption. And these are not just the crimes of one person, but rather a more pressing issue that is affecting America. And this corruption is in fact bad. Now, there was a person in the news recently, a member of Congress, and he was charged on May 10th with 7 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of money laundering, 1 count of theft of public funds, 2 counts of making false statements to the House of Representatives. And this is a total of 13 counts. Who could this be? It could be any number of people. And then more recently, 1 count of conspiracy to commit offenses against the United States, 2 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of making false statements to the Federal Election Commission, 2 counts of aggravated identity theft, 2 counts of false records to the Federal Election Commission, and 1 count of access device fraud. Another 10 counts for a total of 23 filed in the Eastern District of New York. Now this, my fellow Toastmasters, is the talented Mr. Santos, a representative from New York's 3rd District. And this, let me be frank, is not acceptable behavior of an elected official. How would you feel if your representative in Congress, say Nana Diaz-Barragán, were to be taking bribes, be lying to the FEC, be lying to the Congress? Why? Because this is not acceptable behavior of any person, let alone a person we choose to represent ourselves. Now, Mr. Santos may or may not be expelled from the House of Representatives tomorrow, making him the 6th person and only the 3rd person to be expelled. That was not because he was part of the Confederacy. This corruption is in fact bad. Now let's take y'all back to 2019 with Varsity Blues, the code name for the investigation into the 2019 college admissions scandal, including our beloved Aunt Becky. She wanted her daughter to go to USC, and a bunch of other people wanted their children to go to many prestigious colleges, such as USC, UCLA, Harvard. And so they talked to the coaches, and they used their money, and they used their influence to get their children onto teams of sports that they have never played before. One key one was rowing, that we saw a lot of, specifically at UC. Now, Aunt Becky was convicted, and I see a lot of confused faces. Aunt Becky is from Fuller House. But Aunt Becky spent 14 days in a prison that had a spa. So, prison.
Love that.
Now, was her spa prison corruption? I'm not going to assume. I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. But unfortunately, if we look at 2019, we will see corruption getting worse. And it's only been getting worse since another more pressing and more relevant example. 1972, operatives of the Committee to Re-elect the President, who at the time was one Mr. Richard Nixon, they broke in to the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee for the 1972 election against George McGovern. And they wiretapped a bunch of the phones, stole a bunch of the documents, and did a lot of other things relating to Watergate. They were caught, and they were arrested. But Watergate is a name that is associated with corruption in America. It is the quintessential example of it. And now, they caught him in 1972, but it wasn't until 1974 when a reporter in Washington, D.C. was approached by a man codenamed as Deep Throat, who explained the deeper meaning of Watergate, the deeper connections of Watergate, that extended all the way through the upper echelons of the executive branch, all the way to President Richard Nixon. And so, the FBI and several other investigations were launched into Richard Nixon, and they asked for tapes that they realized had been recording in the Oval Office and several other meeting spaces. And so they subpoenaed for these, and Richard Nixon said, no, we will not give you those tapes. So they took it to the Supreme Court, and in U.S. v. Nixon, the Supreme Court said, Richard Nixon, you must give over those tapes. And so he did, except for 18 and a half minutes. Now what happened to those 18 and a half minutes? I don't know. No one knows. Richard Nixon might know, but he's dead. And so an impeachment inquiry was launched into Richard Nixon. And before he could be impeached, he resigned from his office as president. And so Gerald Ford took over, and before any action could be taken into Richard Nixon, he was pardoned by Gerald Ford. It seems to be a recurring theme here, Aunt Becky, Richard Nixon, of not getting any actual punishment. Corruption? Who knows? I guess the TLDR of this is that corruption in America is getting worse. And now this isn't just 2023, 2019, 1972, 1923 with the Teapot Dome scandal. And this isn't just one person, George Santos, Aunt Becky, Richard Nixon. This extends much further than just them. Corruption in America is everywhere. From your lowest school board, to your neighborhood or community watch, to your House of Representatives, to your Senate, and occasionally to the President. And now I see that we must do something. We must ask our representatives, are you actually representing us? Are you being a good, upstanding elected official? Because if they're not, then they're not truly representing you. And I see that now, like George Santos, it is my time to leave. So my fellow Toastmasters, I thank you. And Mr. Toastmaster, I thank you.